Hi guys, welcome back. It's the Vegan Foodie Girl here, and today I'm going to show you how to make tempeh. Tempeh is often used in Japanese dishes, but it is so versatile. It can be used in everything from lasagna to tacos to pizza. Tempeh seems to make people nervous, but I'm going to show you how simple it is to make your own tempeh at home. It means that you'll be able to enjoy it, knowing what's in it, knowing that you made it yourself, and you'll always have a batch on hand in the fridge or freezer. So let's get started. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be making tempeh. I am a total tempeh addict. Once you've made homemade tempeh, you won't go back to buying it again. Not only is it heaps less expensive, but you can make endless varieties and it tastes way better. People are often scared about making tempeh for the first time because it's a fermented food. I must admit I felt the same, but after making one batch, I realized how simple it was, that it's mostly a set and forget recipe, and that it tastes so much better, and so it's worth the effort. Yum. We're going to be making a small batch of soy tempeh today. This is still double and a half the size of the blocks that you normally buy at the supermarket for just a fraction of the price. This is also one I made yesterday, which is a black bean tempeh, which is delicious in Mexican tacos. Once you've learnt the principles, you can transfer it over to other beans and grains. So this is what we're going to be making today. Most importantly, I'm going to teach you how to do it without fancy incubators. That was the thing that frightened me the most. How am I going to maintain the temperature to get the mold right? What if it gets too hot? What if it gets too cold? Well, the thing is, you don't need a fancy incubator. You need an oven with an oven light. That's all you're going to need. For our ingredients, we're going to need 300 grams of soybeans. Just sift through them, make sure there's no discoloured or ugly looking beans. We are going to need 2.5 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, and we're also going to need half a teaspoon of tempeh starter. You can make your own tempeh starter. I'll get a video up at some stage showing you how simple it is, but most people for their first batch will just buy it online. Tempeh starter is quite expensive. You get a tiny little bag, but you only need a small amount. And once you've made your first batch, you can use a small chunk off that first batch to make a massive amount of tempeh starter. So this is my tempeh starter. It's homemade. That's what I'm going to be using today. And I just store that in the freezer. Start by soaking your soybeans in water overnight, or a minimum of 8 hours. They need to be soaked really, really well. I'm going to dehull the soybeans for this tempeh, but a lot of people make soy tempeh without taking the hulls off. I just like the flavour and the texture that you get from taking the hulls off, and for the time it takes to get the hulls off, I think it's well worth it. So this is just 300 grams of dried soybeans, which I've soaked in water overnight. Here's the magic of TV. So I'll get rid of these. I'm going to put on gloves to get rid of the hulls. Normally I just use my hands, but I figure you'll be able to see the dehulling process better against black gloves. These beans have just been soaking overnight, actually a little bit longer because I put them on yesterday afternoon, so a few extra hours. And what we're going to do is, you're just going to massage them in your fingertips, and as you massage them, you'll see how easily the hulls come off. Lots of people do this under running water at the sink. I'm a bit of a conserved water fanatic, so I don't like to do that. I literally just do it in the water that they've been soaking in. After a while, you get enough hulls that they float up to the top. I scrape them off, and then I keep the process going. As you're massaging the beans, you'll see they split into two. That's great. Doesn't matter if they don't, but split beans look really nice in your tempeh, and it gives a bit more of a surface area for the mold that's going to make our tempeh to attach to. Literally just massaging them in your fingertips. The beans are uncooked at this stage, so you're not going to damage them. and just getting some of those holes up to the surface. Ah, there goes one. So you can see the holes are these skins that are coming off. If you were to agitate that water a little bit, the holes float to the surface and you can just pick them out and get rid of them. As I said before, some people do this through running water because it makes it a little bit easier. It's one of my beans in my apple cider vinegar. But for me, I just like to conserve the water and do it like this. Don't worry if you don't get all the holes out. They're not going to change your tempeh that much. And also when you go to the cooking stage, they are going to float to the top and you can skim them off. So you can see I'm just picking out some of those holes. They literally just float to the top and I'm just tossing them. These can go into your compost or into the garden. As you can see, most of the hulls are off the beans now. Don't stress if there's a few left in there, you can skim them off while the beans are cooking. I've drained off the water that I dehulled the beans in, and I'm going to pop some fresh water in. You want water to a couple of inches above the beans. I'm going to put a little bit more than that in. And we're going to cook the soybeans for about 30 to 40 minutes now. You want them cooked to about 80% done. I'm going to pop those on high. Keep an eye on them though, because they will boil over, and just skim any more shells off that come to the surface. Our beans are up to the boil now, so we're going to put a timer on for about 20 minutes and let them boil for about 20 minutes and then check to see how done they are. That's the timer and I've checked. The beans are about 80% done. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to drain off most of the water and I'm going to add in the vinegar, and then we're going to let the rest of that water and vinegar cook out and we will be ready for the next stage. So I've drained off most of the water. We're going to pop in our apple cider vinegar. We've still got the stove on and we're going to boil off the vinegar and the remaining water. And we want to cook that water off until there's nothing left. Just make sure that you are stirring it frequently at this stage because you don't want the beans to burn. The beans were about 80% done when I drained off most of the water and added in the vinegar. So it's not going to take long just to finish their cooking and also to make sure that all the liquid is cooked off. I don't want my beans super soft and squishy because it makes a softer, mushier tempeh, and I like my tempeh with a bit of chew to it. So I always cook them to about 90–95%, so I've just got a little bit of bite left in there. While we're cooking off the remainder of the water and the vinegar, we're going to get our bag ready that our beans are going to go into. This is just a normal sandwich bag from the supermarket. You can reuse these. When you go to remove your tempeh later, you just cut it in half, then you can slip each half out and you can reuse the bag. We want to pierce holes at regular intervals. I'm just using a skewer here and I'm going right through the bag so that both sides are pierced. Your tempeh needs to breathe because we want to grow tempeh mould, not just nasty yucky mould. So we're going to pop some holes in. And you want small holes like this, you don't just want to rip one big hole into it. We are also going to have a thermometer ready. We're going to have a kitchen towel or a hand towel ready. Just going to give these a bit of a stir just to make sure they're cooking off that liquid evenly. And also a tray that can go into your oven, but a tray that can breathe, so not a baking tray, just a wire rack is absolutely fine. So those are ready for the next step, as is our half a teaspoon of tempeh starter. Just cooking off the last of the liquid. When we move on to the next stage, which is the fermentation stage, you need your beans dry. Some people cook off the liquid and then dry them with a hairdryer or try and pat them with paper towel. The easiest way to do it is on the stove. Cook off the liquid, then just cook them for a few seconds longer and you'll see that the moisture will evaporate off the beans and then they're good to go. We're going to transfer them to another bowl to cool. Just making sure none of the beans are sticking to the side or sticking to the bottom as we're cooking off the liquid. And you can see a lot of the liquid's cooked off, but you can see there's still some down the bottom. So we're just stirring those beans so that we don't get them stuck to the side, and we're cooking off all of the liquid. It is much easier to cook off all the liquid than it is to try and pat them dry, or I don't know, some people get out a hairdryer, which is way too much effort for me. We've got very little liquid left in the bottom of our pot, but we need no liquid left in the bottom of the pot. This is the stage where you really need to keep stirring because you don't want anything to stick and burn. As I'm getting less and less moisture, I'm turning it down a little bit. And you'll be able to tell when you get less moisture, you'll feel everything sticking a little bit more, and you'll see the beans going from shiny to matte. That's almost perfect, no moisture left in the bottom. Just going to give it a few more seconds just to make sure I've dried the beans as much as possible. The beans are still a little shiny, which means there's moisture clinging to them, so they can have another few seconds. Perfect. It's time to take them off the stove now and pop them into a bowl to cool. Our beans are in the bowl that they're going to cool in now. We don't want to let them get completely cold. We need a little bit of residual warmth in there to activate our starter. And you want to get them to about 35 degrees. The easiest way to tell is to just pop a thermometer in. If you don't have a thermometer, just the back of your hand. When you can't feel a lot of heat, you're at the right temperature. So you can see these are up around 50, 60, they're going to get to about 60 degrees. So they'll take a good 10 to 15 minutes to cool down. I'll just give them a stir every now and then and keep checking. And once I reach that magical 35 degrees, I'm going to add in our starter. Stirring the beans not only allows them to cool down evenly, but it means that you don't get any hot pockets and any sweating and any moisture developing on the beans as they cool. So I'm going to check the temperature and see where they're at. Almost at 35 degrees. While they continue to drop just another degree or two, I'm going to pop my oven light on. So I'm not going to pop the oven on, I'm just going to pop the light on. This is going to become our incubator for 12 hours. So when you're timing making your tempeh, time it for when you don't need your oven. So often I will make my tempeh and then I'll sit it in the oven overnight while I'm in bed with the light on, which means the oven's free during the day to use to cook with. It needs to be just the light. You don't actually want any heat. As the tempeh ferments, it will start to generate its own heat. 12 hours is the time frame that it needs the assistance of the oven light. You'll see some videos and they say, oh, it must be 32 degrees. And if you don't maintain 32 degrees, you're not going to get the fermentation. I've had mine as low as 26 degrees and it's still fermented. The trick is to not get it much above 32, 34 degrees because you don't want to kill off all that good bacteria. So anywhere between 26 and 34, I've had it in all of those ranges and it's absolutely fine. In every batch I've made, using the oven light and the oven as an incubator is more than enough to make beautiful homemade tempeh. Check the temperature one more time. And the reason you don't want to pop your starter in when it's over 35 degrees is you'll just kill your starter. Still just a smidgen too warm. Another couple of stirs, it'll be at the right temperature. Our bag is here ready to go. The skewer that we poked the holes with is ready to go because we're going to poke a few more in. We've got a towel to wrap our tempeh, which is going to hold in that initial heat. And we've got a cooling tray, which the whole lot will sit on in the oven. It's climbing so slowly now that I know even if it registers over 35, it's super close to 35 degrees. Next is the step where you add your live culture, so your tempeh starter. Like I mentioned before, I'll get a video up for how to make your starter. Different starters will ferment in different amounts of time. So depending on the starter you use, it'll change the time frame that you start to see the mold develop. We're going to sprinkle half of our starter on, then we're going to stir it around, and then we're going to repeat with the other half of the starter. You don't want to add it all at once because you want to try and get an even coating on your beans. And the best way to do that is add it in a couple of sprinkles. That's the first half. That's the second half. Remember, you're working with a live culture, so after you've inoculated your beans, everything has to be wiped down, including your bench. Mix that through our beans, making sure that every bean has a touch of the starter. Simple as that. We've got our inoculated soybeans. They are now going to be transferred into your pre-prepared holy bag. Spoonful at a time, start shoveling them in. I find this quantity is perfect for a standard sandwich bag from the supermarket. This process is the same whether you're using soybeans or you saw earlier I had a batch of black bean tempeh. I like black bean tempeh for Mexican dishes. The only thing is if you are making a mixed bean tempeh, you need to cook the individual beans separately because chickpeas take a different amount of time to soybeans, which take a different amount of time to black beans, which takes a different amount of time to quinoa. So by all means, mix your grains and your pulses, but cook them separately. Bag a bit of a shakedown. And we're going to pop in the last of the beans. Now we're going to zip up the bag and then we're going to form our block. So zip it up nice and tight because if you try and squash it and you've left it open, you'll get beans everywhere. And then give your beans a bit of a pat and a gentle squash. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pierce a few holes in the sides of the bag. This would have been too hard before when the bag was flat. Make sure you don't get the seam because you don't want to split the seam on your bag. And a few nice and close to the top of the bag. And a couple nice and close to the bottom of the bag. All right, give them a nice flatten out, get out some of that air, make it a nice even block. You don't want a block that's got a big divot in the middle. It's going to be ugly when it's finished. Not that it'll make any difference to the taste. Look at that, that's the start of your own tempeh. Some people form their block onto a board first like this so they can get it nice and flat and nice and even, and that makes it easier to slide onto your tray. And then I like to just give it another little bit of a flatten, make sure it's nice and even so that we get this really nice block at the end. We're then going to wrap that in your kitchen towel. I've just got a little hand towel here, and that is going to go into your oven with the light on for 12 hours. I always set a timer because otherwise I'm prone to forgetting it's in the oven. And in 12 hours time, we're going to return. I'm going to show you what to do next, but we're basically going to take it away from its heat source. So you're either going to take it out of the oven and just sit it somewhere warm, wrapped in its towel, because by that stage it'll be generating its own heat, or you're just going to switch off the oven light and leave it in there if you're not using your oven. So we'll see you in 12 hours. After 12 hours, we won't have any white film yet, but the beans are nice and warm. I'm going to leave them covered in there, but I'm going to switch the light off. They'll stay in there nice and warm, and then we'll check them again in 12 hours. Here we are after 24 hours, guys. I've just got mine sitting in the oven with the light off because it's producing enough heat of its own now. And you can see we've started to get some action with the white mycelium. Not all tempeh will start to show this white mycelium within 24 hours. It depends on your starter. Don't panic if it's not. Just leave it fermenting in a nice warm place, and within 24 to 48 hours, you're going to see this mycelium start to grow. So I'm just going to close up my oven. I'm leaving the light off. The tempeh's got enough heat in it. I've popped a thermometer on it occasionally just to make sure, and I'll leave it for another 12 hours and check it again. "36 hours later with our finished tempeh. So you'll notice that the tempeh now has a beautiful coating of white mycelium. Hopefully you can see that through the shine of the plastic. Other than the mycelium, the other way that you can tell that your tempeh is ready is your block is nice and firm. So from here you've got a couple of options. You can store it in the fridge for about 7 days, but it's going to continue to ferment much slower, but it will continue to flavour up. Some people don't like the bitter flavour of tempeh, and the longer you leave it to ferment, the more you'll get that slightly bitter flavour to it. The best thing that I've found to do is once it's finished fermenting, so after about anywhere from 24 to 48 hours, is to steam it and then store it in the fridge. Steaming it stops that fermentation process. Just take it out of its plastic bag, pop it in a steamer for anywhere between 15 to 30 minutes, depending on your steamer, and then you can store it in the fridge for 7 to 10 days. The other thing that you can do after you steam your tempeh is store it in the freezer. It keeps in the freezer for months and months and months. Tempeh must be cooked before eating, so you cannot eat it raw. I'm going to open this up now. If you wanted to keep your plastic bag to reuse it, cut the tempeh in half and then pull it out in half sections, and then you can reuse the bag. I'm just going to cut it so that you guys can see the tempeh. And look at that lovely block of homemade tempeh. You can see a few small little holes. That's where we poked holes after it was in the bag. This block here has already been steamed. You will notice that it's a little bit darker and the mycelium seems to have sunk into the tempeh. So I've just had this in the fridge for about a week. I'll use it tonight. This one I'm about to pop in the steamer, pre-steam it, and then I'll store it in the fridge. Just one note. If you're going to use your tempeh to make starter, which is what I recommend, because tempeh starter is very expensive and quite difficult to get, don't steam it and don't stop fermenting it. At 36 hours or whenever you think the tempeh is ready, what you need to do is cut off a small section so that you can create your starter from that section, because you're going to continue to let that ferment. I'll put a video above showing how to make your own tempeh starter, but you can see I've got a truckload of tempeh starter here, and it was made from a little section about this big of tempeh. If I was to try and buy that, it would literally probably cost $100, $200. A small bag of tempeh starter is about $20. Yes, you'll get a couple of batches out of it, but make your own, guys. It's so simple once you've done it a few times. It'll save you heaps of money and you know what's in your starter. The other thing I wanted to touch base on is the fact that tempeh is so versatile. Anywhere you can use textured vegetable protein, you can use tempeh and get better results. This has much more natural flavour than this. You can use it in lasagnas and bologneses. You can crumble it and make Mexican tortillas out of it. You can slice it thinly, marinate it, fry it crispily for bacon. You can use it in chunks on top of pizza. You can make dips out of it. It has endless uses. So anything you can do with this, you can do with this. A lot cheaper, a lot tastier, and it's got all that good mycelium, which is great for your gut biome. One more thing to note about your tempeh, guys, is that sometimes you might get black spots on your tempeh. That is absolutely fine. Black or grey spots or black or grey patches are absolutely fine. That's just where it has fermented a little bit longer and it's started to sporulate. That's actually great if you're going to make your own starter with that tempeh. That's the stage that we push it to when we make our own starter. But you can eat that. It doesn't affect it. It's delicious. The only type of colour that you don't want to see is green or pink spots. The other way to tell if your tempeh is safe to eat is give it a good sniff. Oh, it smells deliciously nutty and clean. If you have any ammonia smell at all, you'll go like this. Don't eat that tempeh. It is a dead giveaway that something's gone wrong in your fermentation process. If it smells nutty, if it smells clean, gobble that up. I'm going to steam this up and then I'm going to use it tonight to make a lasagna. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video, guys. If you have, please give it a like and subscribe, and I'll see you back in the Vegan Foodie Girl kitchen next time.